Hello everybody and welcome to this 5th prequel Dune book summary, which is I think the 14th overall Dune book in the series. It's been such a lesson in restraint for me to not watch the show because I don't want to spoil the books for myself. Initially I thought that the show was going to be based on Sisterhood of Dune, not even close. Maybe Mentats of Dune, the book after, no, again not. And now I'm on Navigators of Dune. I'm halfway through the book and I did go back and watch the trailer and I could recognize a couple of things. But I still think we're not quite there yet, because in the books where I am now, Valia Harkonnen, she's still kind of consolidating her power on Wallach X, right? Like she's dispatched, is it Fiella, to Seleucus Secundus to become Emperor Roderick's truthsayer, but Fiella hasn't really done much yet. And then obviously in the previous book, Valia had sent her sister Tula to Caladan to kill Ori Atreides. The moves that she's making right now aren't game-changing yet. As the book suggests, this is called Navigators of Dune. And so the central players, at least in the first half of this book, are the Navigators, Yosef Venport, and then obviously Emperor Roderick Corrino. And I think that the storyline with Vorian Atreides, Tula, and Valia is a little bit secondary right now. So I don't know, obviously I haven't seen the show yet, so I don't know, maybe it does start where this book starts. Just going to have to read the second half of this book and then watch the show and we'll talk about it then. Anyway, we have a lot to get through, so onto the video. Roderick now sits on the imperial throne following the assassination of his brother Emperor Salvador. At this time, the imperial forces are preparing for a surprise attack against Venport. And this comes 2 months after Venport was exposed as being the one who assassinated Salvador. So after he was exposed, he withdrew all of his navigators from the imperial service. Now remember, Venport is the only one who knows the secret into how to make navigators. Roderick's plan, Emperor Roderick's plan, is to have Venport defeated, his assets would be seized, and then his plan would be to have the Imperium get their navigators back. So remember, the navigators were highly valuable because they were able to foresee safe pathways through space. Venport at this time is also holding some Imperial forces hostage. About 70 warships are still trapped on a Venhold carrier. So Venport has amassed a lot of power. He has monopoly over spice operations on Arrakis. He's kept the secrets of Folding Space and the Navigators, and of course he has his banking operations across the Imperium. And Roderick believes that only the Emperor, only he should hold that much power and not Venport. Meanwhile on Kolhar, which is a fortress, Venport waits for the Emperor's response because he knows that he's going to retaliate. Not only are Venport's defenses really good, but remember, he also has a secret weapon. He has Cymex. So Drygo, who is Yosef's mentat, arrives on Lampadas in a stealth ship with 3 Cymex. Now remember, Lampadas was taken over again by the Baclarians and Manfred Torondo, and he did away with Gilbertus. Well, yeah, Drygo is here. He actually wants to possibly kill Manfred Torondo, and he just wants to lay waste to Lampadas. Manfred is sleeping peacefully in the capital city of Lampadas when suddenly heavy objects streamed down through the atmosphere, wreathed in the flames of deceleration. 3 projectiles struck the ground outside Empok. So the attack has begun. On Denali, the researchers are fascinated by it, and they're learning a lot from Erasmus's memory core, which has valuable information. Remember, he and Anna Corrino escaped Lampadas. He tells the researchers, who all have a lot of hatred for the Butlerians, that not only will he help them defend Venhold, but he'll help them annihilate the Butlerians. Mother Superior Valia Harkonnen is still wary of the Seleucus sisters. I mean, sure, they'd made a promise to Rakalla to work together, but Valia needed more reassurances that they could be trusted, because after all, promises that were broken once could be broken again. She announces to the sisters that they should move past the damaging teachings of the rebellious Dorothea, and they should strengthen their ranks. She checks the sisters for their expressions, and most of them seem to submit, but there are others who are kind of anxious and meek, and she announces that everybody is going to be individually interviewed and hopefully welcomed back into the fold. Either they would prove their allegiance to Valia or they would die. Valia is very pleased with her sister Tula Harkonnen, and she also thinks that it's a very nice touch that Tula killed her husband Ori in their marital bed. Right now, nobody knows where Vor and Willem are, but one thing that needs attention is Tula's reaction to this killing. She feels bad, and she actually wonders if things could have been different. And this is absurd to Valia, who wouldn't think twice about killing people who got in the way of what she wanted. Tula's guilty conscience might be a problem. Fiella and a few of the Reverend Mothers head to Seleucia to take their place in the imperial court. Fiella wants to gain the Emperor's trust. In order to do this, she plans to reveal what Venport is up to and just how dangerous he is. Valia reminds her that it's a fine line because Venport did help the sisterhood in their time of need when they disbanded on Rossack, remember? His wife also helped them retrieve their secret computers with all the breeding records and the breeding database. Using information on Venport to curry favor or to get into the Emperor's good books would certainly be seen as a betrayal by Venport. Willem and Vor reach Kepler and they assume roles as laborers looking for work. It's picking season in the orchids, and one of the orchids looking for workers is the Atreides orchid. The owner, Jeff, is one of Vor's great-great-grandsons, and Vor and Willem also show photos of Tula, and they warn everybody that she's very dangerous, and they have reason to believe that she is coming to Kepler, so they best be careful. Meanwhile, on Lampadas, the Cymex trample random people, killing them, they destroy homes, and of course they destroy Manfred Torondo's home, but Inari manages to get him to a safe place just in time. Frustrated without having found Manfred, the Cymex cause more destruction before returning to their pods and leaving. So while Joseph Venport is rather distracted by his standoff with Emperor Roderick and building his defenses up on Kolhar, his grandmother Norma Canva is more concerned about the availability of spice for her navigators. This is the highest priority, and she's concerned that the distraction will result in a disruption in the flow of spice. Joseph assures her that he's found a sietch deep out in the desert, and that's where they're going to keep their stockpile of melange. Joseph goes and visits the Empress troops, you know, the ones that he's holding captive, and even though he refers to them as guests and he says that he'll just keep them until this business with Roderick is over, the captured soldiers openly pledge their allegiance to Emperor Roderick and they want nothing to do with Venport, and that's not going to change. On Salisu Secundus, Roderick's wife Haditha expresses her mistrust of the sisterhood, but Roderick tells her that the Imperium needs a new truthsayer. Fiella arrives to introduce herself shortly thereafter, and to prove her worth, obviously, she offers some secret information on Venport. She tells Roderick that Venport intends to control spice operations on Arrakis, and he doesn't intend on tolerating the Imperial presence there much longer. They also have more resources on Arrakis than the Emperor does. She tells him that his citizens are also addicted to spice and the flow needs to be restored because they're starting to grow restless. The Emperor's forces cannot control the spice operations. She also reminds Roderick that Venport needs Arrakis and he can't really survive without it because then he won't be able to create his navigators if he doesn't have that steady flow of spice. And, you know, to keep them alive and functioning. Right now, Roderick is hoping that his attack on Kolhar will be successful. Remember, they're going on this mission to Kolhar, where Venport Holdings is headquartered. That way he can turn his attention on Arrakis, but he feels that once Kolhar is defeated, Arrakis will be easy. So the pilot in the military fleet is leaving Seleucia and they're heading to Kolhar right now. As soon as the Imperial carrier emerged above the planet, the attack ships would be dispatched in an overwhelming surprise assault. Without any time to respond, Venport Holdings would fall. Anticipation built among the troops. So they finally do reach their destination and they expect to take Venport by surprise. Instead, the bridge deck was filled with blazing light, raging ionized gases, stellar fire. Navigation error, someone yelled. The carrier's course was only fractionally off, a tiny mistake on a cosmic scale, but enough to drop the warship into the broiling fringes of Kolhar's sun. The first nav officer shouted, but Vincent Rune could see nothing at all because the searing light had rendered him blind, along with everybody else on the flight deck. There was no time for screaming or whimpering. Coronal loops swirled up and around. Fiery convection cells churned plasma below. The Fold Space carrier vaporized instantly, taking with it 100 grand battleships. So Drygo returns to Denali after his attack on Lampadas, and he gives a report of the attack. 78 dwellings and 9 commercial buildings destroyed, with another 37 homes burning at the time the Cymex withdrew. 862 confirmed fatalities, primarily bystanders, collateral damage. Even though they didn't get Manfred, they were certainly successful in sending a message. Tula Harkonnen goes to Lanky Vale, questioning everything. Is she her sister's pawn? Is she the sisterhood's pawn? What happens to her now? She's also kind of jumpy, knowing that Vor and Willem aren't just going to let this go. Her brother Danvers tells her that he's applying for a position in the Imperial Court. And Tula thinks of her time with Ori and how they had actually had a good wedding night and sweet kisses before she had to kill him. She really is struggling with the guilt. Willem and Vor find that Kepler is quite safe and that Tula hasn't been there. So after they warn everybody else, they decide to head for Lanky Vale. On Denali, Robot Erasmus finds out that Drygo had saved some of Gilbertus Alban's cells, and that's the body that he says that he wants the Tuluxa to grow for him. Venport buys a sietch off some Fremen, and he's looking for a place, obviously, to stockpile his melange deep out in the desert. He also makes the command to have the Imperial operations destroyed and steal their spice and add it to his own stockpile. There's a harsh storm that's on its way, and everybody's vulnerable to it. So Yosef kind of uses the cover of the storm to stage an attack because nobody would know that it was him that attacked the Imperial forces. Valia is pretty much torturing non-compliant sisters in her efforts to re-educate them. She beats and tortures them for information, withholds food and water. When one of the sisters who is tortured and bleeding out of her ears is unable to even hear her own voice due to the pain inflicted on her, Valia has one of the other sisters, Olivia, kill her. Vorian and Willem make it to Lunky Vale and they stay at an inn for the night, but they have just missed Tula, who has left for Chusuk, another planet. Vor's cover gets blown really quickly though. Remember, he worked on Lunky Vale with the Harkonnens under an assumed identity? Well, now they know that he is actually Vorian Atreides. He explains to Virgil Harkonnen that he and Griffin were actually good friends and that he, Vor, was the one who sought to have Griffin's body brought home. Then Willem tells everybody, especially Tula's heartbroken parents, that she lied, pretended to be in love with his brother Ori, and that she killed him in their marital bed by slashing his throat. Willem is lashing out at everybody, but Vor manages to calm him down and convince him that their fight is only with Tula Harkonnen and not the rest of the Harkonnens. Anyway, they decide to go to Chusuk to find her. Meanwhile, on Salusa, things seem to be going well for Roderick. They're looking up. In an unprecedented move, Roderick had used his authority to seize control of Venhold banks operating on Imperial planets. This one executive order would deprive the tycoon of significant assets, freezing much of his wealth. Venport's commercial empire would suddenly find itself without cash to continue its operations, to buy fuel or commodities, or to hire traders to pay salaries of its pilots and its crew. The man undoubtedly had other sources of wealth and hidden funds in illicit accounts, but this would hurt him, and it would hurt him badly. Then that morning, Fiella, his truthsayer, sneaks in a Fremen, and it just so happens to be the same Fremen who sold the sietch to Venport. So he says that he knows the precise location of the sietch and this giant stockpile of melange. Modoc, the Fremen, offers to destroy the stockpile for a fee. Since Roderick can't afford to expend any more military forces to this effort, he agrees to it. After all, it would further destabilize Venport. Yosef fumes when he gets the news that his financial assets have been seized and he's been declared an outlaw pretty much. He does have some hidden assets to liquidate in order to buy himself some time, but they do need their funds. They won't be able to function without them long term. Drago wants to go to Salusa to try and negotiate, but Yosef thinks that they're long past that. He thinks that he put Roderick on the throne only to find out that he's not fit for it. His plan is to threaten to seize the Imperial throne because he feels that he has no other choice. He says that he has no choice but to conquer Salusa, and he'll use a Cymax to instill fear in people. Valia is also livid after hearing news that Vor had been on Lunky Vale in search of Tula. Tula, meanwhile, is on Chusuk. She's still having nightmares about what she did on her wedding night. She plays her instrument, the balisette, and she goes out to the market where she meets this man named Liam, and he takes a liking to her. They play instruments together, he helps her. Yosef decides that he wants to lay siege to Salusa Secundus, knowing that the Emperor wouldn't be able to match him militarily. The Cymax are not interested in Yosef's political squabbles, as they call them. They say that they want to destroy Manfred Torondo and Lambalas. Yosef tells them that without defeating the Emperor and regaining control of their bank accounts, there is no defeating Manfred and the Butlerians. So the Cymax agree to help take Salusa, and thereafter they'll get what they want. The Mentat school has been rebuilt after the attack, and Manfred has installed a new interim director and a careful curriculum for the students. He decides that he's also going to head to Salusa to re-establish his position with the new emperor and pretty much remind him who's boss. Remember, Yosef, Norma, and the others are also on their way to Salusa. Yosef has some of the landing pods drop into the atmosphere of Salusa, and he's trying to send a message. They don't want to cause any casualties or any damage yet, so they hang back to try and avoid that. Some small fire is exchanged between the Imperial forces and the Venhold ones, and then Venport lets 3 of his Cymax loose, but he lets them just hang out pretty much outside of the capital city, Zamir. They're just looming. He then announces that he is a loyal citizen of the Imperium, but he has been given no choice but to fight back after everything has been taken away from him, and he's here to present Roderick with the terms for his surrender, Roderick's surrender. This is now a direct attack on the Emperor and Seleucia, and Roderick is angry that Joseph actually has the gall to do this. He's also pretty shaken at the thought of Venport usurping the throne, because this is a real possibility. Modok and his tribe settle at their new siege, but soon they mount sandworms and they head back to their previous siege. Remember, he was playing both sides, and he sold the siege to Venport, and then he also sold the information to the Emperor. So he's going to sabotage the same very siege. So while Venport's security fired and killed some of the Fremen, other Fremen managed to drop some explosives in the caves, and of course the worms were there to do most of the damage, and they damaged everything else in sight. Back on Seleucia, Roderick and Venport are still in a standoff. Heditha, Roderick's wife, tells him that destroying Seleucia wouldn't be in Venport's best business interests, and that's not what he wants. He wants to protect his own interests after all. This is a weak spot, and of course it's Roderick's advantage. She thinks that they can make some kind of concession that Venport will accept, because she knows that Venport doesn't actually have an interest in destroying Seleucia or killing Roderick. She thinks that Venport has actually shown incredible restraint after what Salvador had done on Arrakis, and now Roderick freezing all of his accounts. She encourages Roderick to negotiate. Roderick considers transferring rule of the Imperium to his son Javico, and then taking the fall, even if that means, sacrificing his life. Just then, Manfred arrives onto Seleucia with reinforcement, and he tells Roderick that he's willing to fight alongside him. Yosef is outraged. This unexpected force of Butlerian warships changed the balance of the conflict. Even with their inferior weapons and shields, the extra 140 warships joined with the Imperial Defense Fleet made the odds more even. And the reckless fanatics were willing to fight in suicidal fashion, which made them far more dangerous. While this is all happening, Norma, through her prescience, senses that her spice is in danger. The two sides start firing at each other, but Norma feels that this battle is no longer relevant to her now, and she's preparing to go to Arrakis to try and save the spice, even though it might be too late. Joseph wants to stay on Seleucia and fight, but remember, Norma has the ability to remove them from there, and she transports them, unwillingly really, to Arrakis. Manfred, seeing that all of the ships are suddenly disappearing, thinks that he's the one who actually defeated Venport, and he forced Venport to retreat, and so his Butlerians start celebrating, thinking that this is a victory. Valia is thinking about her breeding program, and she's interrupted by the other memories telling her that her actions are self-serving and that she leaves dead bodies in her wake. She argues with them, convinced that her goals and the sisterhood's goals are one and the same. But the other memory sisters are not happy with her. After all, she also turned her younger sister into a murderess. They vow to stop her, and they tell her that they could drive her to take her own life, or they could not give her a moment's peace. Remember, Valia couldn't really control or block out these voices. She eventually does threaten to kill every last sister, alive sister, and herself, which would mean that these other memory sisters would vanish. She tells them that from this point on, they're only to speak if they have something helpful to her cause. And she also tells them that, much like the living sisters, they're under her command. Vorian and Willem finally make it to Chusuk, and they're on a search for Tula. They ask around and eventually spot her and a male companion at a performance hall. So Vorian, when he spots her, he charges for her, but he's intercepted by the sisterhood, who had come to collect Tula on Chusuk and transport her back to Wallach X. They beat down both Willem and Vor is unconscious, but he does give a good fight before he goes down. Norma tells Yosef that their spice bank is under attack. In fact, as they reach Arrakis, she tells him that everything's already been lost. Yosef sees the scars of explosion, so he knows that it's man-made, but he's certain that the destruction was also caused by something greater. In any case, this main stockpile is gone, and the only ones left are the small ones on Denali and Kolhar. This is years of profits gone, and Venport is sure that Roderick is behind it. So remember, Venport had the Imperial soldiers captured. Well, their Admiral Hart had been waiting for the moment that they could break free from their prison and escape Kolhar. Now, he potentially sees the chance, the moment, because Venport took most of his warships to the Seleucia mission. Once Director Venport and his assault fleet were gone, leaving Kolhar relatively unguarded, Hart signaled his ships, gave a shortened timetable for action, and when all the pieces were in place and his soldiers were ready, he sent the activation signal. The breakout was on. They would have but one chance, one window of opportunity, and they managed. They escaped Kolhar. Roderick dreads thinking about what he'll owe Manfred to Rondo for helping him save them from the Venport attack, because he knows that Manfred didn't do it for altruistic reasons. He has his own agenda. At this point, by the way, we're 8 decades from the Battle of Corin. So the Butlerians are all gathered in front of the palace with their banners, and Manfred is soon going to be landing, and of course he would want a hero's welcome. As Manfred steps out, Roderick's wife reminds him that they do need to show him some respect because they did save him. Roderick agrees, but he says he'll just go through the motions because all of this is the Butlerians' fault to begin with, he thinks. So when going over to the Emperor, Manfred introduces his mentats as a gift to the Emperor, but the Emperor tells him that he already has his truthsayer named Sister Fiella. Manfred does not approve because she was trained by Gilbertus Albans, who was an ally to Erasmus, so she can't be trusted. Roderick does end up accepting 2 of the mentats, and he says he'll find a use for them. The next day, Admiral Hart and the rest of the hostage Imperial fleet arrive from Kolhar. They also brought with them something very special, a navigator, who Roderick intends to study at length. Things are really starting to look up. On Chuzik, Vor and Willem are rushed to the emergency room. Because of Vor's life-extending treatment, he heals quite quickly, whereas Willem is still unconscious with some internal bleeding and broken bones. Willem had gotten friendly with a woman named Harmona, and she turned out to be some kind of noble, a princess, and she arranged for them to be treated in a private facility. She introduces herself as Harmona Bach, a member of the ruling Landsraad family on Chuzik, and she informs Vor that just as he has suspected, Tula has escaped the planet. Willem needs a few weeks to recover still, so Vor decides that he's going to go after Tula Harkonnen on his own. While Hermana tells him that Willem will be taken care of, Vor decides that he needs to find a way to draw Tula out from Wallach X because she'd be too guarded. He can't go and look for her there. He'll go to Corin because there's no real collateral damage there if the Harkonnens decide to come after him. Tula makes it back to Wallach X and explains to her sister Valia what happened on Chuzik. Valia is very disappointed that Vorian Atreides himself came after her and she let him live, but Tula says that the sisters took care of him. She also says that she wants to be done with the killing. When Valia tells her that she'll send people out to track down Vor and Willem to finish them off, Tula just can't be bothered. Joseph realizes that he suffered a big setback, so he departs for Kolhar to regroup. But when the Venport ships arrived at the headquarters planet, his wife had more bad news for him. While the bulk of the warships had been away, Admiral Umberto Hart had staged a daring overthrow of the Fold-Space carrier that had been holding his Imperial battle group hostage. They were gone. Joseph is most concerned that one of his navigators had also been taken, so the secret of how they could be made, it could be discovered, if they study it well enough. The body that the Tuluxa are growing for Erasmus from Gilbertus' cells is eventually ready, and even he's not really satisfied with it. It's missing a mole and it's missing some scars, and it looks the same, but it's not the same. The Tuluxa tell him that the DNA is the same, but even with identical twins, not everything is entirely the same. The body is acceptable though, so the operation is completed and Erasmus is finally human, or he's in a human body. On Tulusa, Roderick is presented with a Suk doctor who will be able to get information out of the navigator. He also has funds dedicated to studying this navigator. He does make it known, though, that he's never approved of the Sculpal torturer's methods, and even though it might be necessary to get information, he tells the torturer that even though this navigator, doesn't really seem to be human, he doesn't want it harmed or killed. And so the Suk doctor agrees to be careful. Manfred is very pleased. His cult is celebrating still after 4 days. Tens of thousands of Butlerians camped out by the palace, and Roderick hasn't been able to remove them. One of the leaders from the Landsraad comes to Manfred then, and he tells him that while they were purging his planet, they found something that would be very helpful to his cause. Something that was used in the battle against the thinking machines, and now he wants Manfred to have them. Atomics. Now remember, this is how Earth was also destroyed, using atomics. Joseph Venport is down, but he's not out. His wife Chioba reminds him that if it weren't for him taking the sisterhood to Wallach X, they wouldn't have survived, and they owe him a debt. She says that she'll go to Wallach X and talk to Valia to see if they could be allies, and if the sisterhood could act as intermediaries and talk to Roderick on their behalf. Joseph also gets the good news that the Denali operations are going well. The Simic army with the navigator brains to guide them. So in about 2 weeks, they would be ready to level Lampedos. The only issue, obviously, is that Manfred and most of his Butlerian forces are on Seleucia, so they're going to have to wait until they get back. Anna Karina and Erasmus go on a walk together. He's in his new body now, which Anna finds so handsome, and she tells him that she wants to teach him everything there is to know about being human and the human experience. So, of course, this includes pleasures of the flesh. So they kiss and they have sex. And that is the end of part 1 of Navigators of Dune. So Roderick is in quite a difficult position because he obviously knows that Venport is the lesser of two evils if you're comparing the Butlerians, but he doesn't feel that Venport should have that much power anyway. It'll be interesting to see who wins out between the two of them. Obviously, Venport has a secret Cymex. He has about 100 of them, so, you know, my money is on Venport, but yeah, we'll see. Anyway, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.